Welcome to The Longest Term. This is episode 77, Spring Break, Games Played Lately. My name is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
In this episode, we're going to talk about a lot of the games that we've been playing lately.
If the title didn't give that away to you, then, hey, maybe we should be doing something more clever with our titles.
Exactly. We've had the chance to play a lot of cool games lately. You may notice that Tyler did not announce. He's sitting this one out. He's been tied up with a lot of other things to start the year, right? Unfortunately, he hasn't been playing as many games. So
yeah, and so Kevin and I have been able to play a lot of games lately together.
Which has been, we haven't always done that, right?
No, and we've gotten some two-player games. We've gotten some group games. But we've played a lot more games lately than I think we normally do. And we just wanted to do an episode as a result of that was just like, hey, here, let's catch up on everything that we've been playing. Because I think we've been playing some great games.
We have been playing some great games. For the most part, they've been really good. And I've enjoyed all of them. So
one of the things that I think is worth noting is that we just recorded our last episode being our Shelf of Shame episodes.
Oh, I know where this is going.
We're doing great, right?
Some of us are
doing great. Before even that episode published, I got 3 of my 5 games off of my shelf. And so those will be some of the games I talk about in this episode, some of them. But yeah, no, I'm excited because I'm doing really well, and I got a lot of the year left to go to get the last 2.
You're doing pretty good. I have to remember what games I even talked about.
You're on the same track as last year.
I've fallen in the same trap I did before. No, I think I remember most of them, and I'm excited to get some of them played too. We've been messaging a friend back and forth. He listened to our episode, Eric, and he's like, I want to play Star Trek Captain's Chair. I'm like, yes, I do too. He's going to help me get that off my shelf of shame. I'm excited to get it played.
Well, and he wants to play Arcs, which I thought I wasn't going to be able to get that off my shelf.
Right.
But Eric, I think, has infused a little bit of extra life into our games lately. And so he hasn't played all of our collections.
Right.
And so there's a lot of opportunities, and we haven't played a lot of his collection. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And some of the games we'll be talking about were some of those games that we played with him. Absolutely.
Well, should we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. Who's starting?
I'll start. I'll start with a game that we recently played. Kevin and I had an opportunity to go to our friend Ben's house and play with Ben and Greg and Kevin and myself. So we ended up playing a few games that night. But one of the games that we played was a game that I hadn't heard of. I hadn't played before. But it was from a publisher that we enjoy, and we've played a lot of their little box games. This is called Lure, and it's published by All Play Games. The designer is Satoru Nakamura, and there's a couple of artists on here, and the art is really nice and fun. Just you're catching fish, but it's done by Anka Gavril and Daniel Profiri. This is, if you know anything about All Play Games, a lot of their games are these like small box games. We've played Mountain Goats. What are some of the other ones we've done?
Well, I've played a game called GPS.
And the Bacon one, right?
There's Bacon. I haven't played Bacon. There is, now I'm drawing a blank. Sequoia is another one that's a little bit older that I've played. I don't know if you guys have played. That's really good. But there's a bunch of them in this line, and they're all just super easy to learn, right?
Yeah.
Like 1-page rules that take
straightforward, get you right into the game. And there is a degree of luck involved, I think, in every single one of these games. So there's some randomization. But Lure, what Lure is specifically is this is a game where players are competing to collect the most points by catching fish. And each fish is going to have a couple of things on it. Some of them may have a lure icon. So you have to, where the title of this game comes from is everybody gets a lure to start, but then there are other fish that you can catch to gain more lures, and or if you don't catch fish, you can gain lures and things like that. So throughout the game, you're getting these lures, and they're giving you bonus opportunities to catch fish. But every single one of these fish is going to have a number value on it. And you have a handful of dice in front of you. I think 7 dice or something like that is about how many you have. Yeah. And 2 of those are non-standard D6 dice, and the rest are D6.
So it's like a D20 and a D12, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the way the game works is every round there are several fish laid out in a row, and you have they are giving you probabilities of how likely you can catch it. So one fish may say, in order to catch this, you have to roll 10 plus value, and one of those values must equal a 1 or something like that. So they'll have these different caveats on the fish that you're trying to catch. And at the start of the round, everybody has a screen in front of them. They get to select how many dice they want to contribute to trying to catch this fish. And this is where the game is there's a bid phase, and you're trying to decide how many dice should I select to go and catch this fish, because the person who chooses the fewest die are going to be able to try and catch the fish first.
Yeah, because you could select all of your dice every time and have the best chance to catch the fish, but there may be no fish left over because everybody else got them first, right?
And what I didn't understand at first about this game was you're not just going after one of these fish in the row, you're going after all of them. So if you satisfy the requirements for more than one fish with a single dice roll, then you're going to get a bucket full of fish potentially.
Right.
So the nuance of the game here is, how many dice do I select and be competitive still to be able to catch as many fish as I possibly can? And we played, like I said, with 4 players, which I think made it pretty interesting. I don't know. I'd be curious to play this one at a lesser player count, but I feel like this game is going to do better at higher player counts.
I agree with that.
Because you've got a lot of interaction there as to the pressure of how many dice do I select, and it's harder to read the table when you have multiple opponents as opposed to maybe 1 or 2. So
yeah, what's also interesting is if you tie with somebody on the dice that you select. So say I select 3 and you select 3, then you both roll, but only one of us is going to get those if we qualify. It's whoever is closest to value. So if you've got to get 16 plus, right, and roll a 6 as well. If we both do that and I roll an 18 and you roll a 25, I get that because I'm closer to 16, which that was an interesting dynamic too. And it adds to the decision of what dice am I going to roll? Do I go for the, because I remember one turn, it's like, well, I could ensure I get it if I roll my D20, but I'm going to do my D12 because if I roll my D12 better, I'm going to be closer to that number and I'm going to be able to catch that fish. Instead of somebody else, and I thought that dynamic was interesting.
I thought that was interesting too. And the fact that you're sitting there trying to roll for multiple fish means that, like, if I'm trying to catch more than one fish and I roll the exact same dice as somebody else or amount of dice, if my value on one of them is off, then like if you're trying to catch them essentially and you have a 25 value, you rolled, say that you roll 5 dice and the other person rolls 5 dice. Well, what if they roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Right.
And the value was be as close to 6 as possible. You're guaranteed to get the ones that you want, but then there are some at the other end that you're so far away from what their value is that it didn't even matter anymore. And so it just made it really interesting to me to see how to select those dice and then how to maximize your potential point output. I don't think I did incredibly well at this game. I felt like I was consistently catching fish, but I wasn't catching like the best value fish because some of them have point values that are higher or lower than others.
Right.
And I was just going for, can I catch fish consistently?
Yeah.
And I didn't end up winning this one, but I felt like I did all right, but I came in 3rd, I think, in this game.
Yeah. I think I ended up winning this one.
I think you did. Yeah.
I thought it was a lot of fun. And what's interesting to me is the lures and when you decide to play the lures, because I banked those up for a few turns, right? And then I had 3 or 4 and I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the board state. I'm looking at the things that I can potentially get. I'm like, okay, I'm all in on this one. I took all of the lures. I took, enough dice where I thought I could be first, rolled everything, and I ended up cleaning up the whole board on that
so
one
satisfying.
on that one turn. And I'm like, yes. And everybody else is like, I got nothing now. They come later in turn order and they don't have anything to catch. And that feeling when you're able to pull that off was pretty cool. I like
It's great for you and really disappointing for other people who were thinking, look, they're only rolling low dice. And that was a fun decision for me is I'm going to guess that a lot of people are going to roll for low dice here to try and get them. And I'm going to guess because of the point values that are on the table, the low dice probabilities are they're not going to catch it because they're not going to hit the point value. So there's going to be some leftover fish here. And I'm just going to grab all my dice and try and roll those so that I can catch more potential ones. And that was fun. But then when like you end up going and sweeping the entire row somehow, I'm like, how did that even happen? It was fun. I liked it.
Yeah, it's a fun push your luck, almost party style game where everybody's having a good time around the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
It's a good dice chucker with mitigation potential in it that I really enjoyed. So yeah, that was Lure from All Play Games.
All right, so Tyson mentioned we've had a chance to play some games together, and a 2-player game that I have had my eye on for a while is called Intent to Kill.
And mind you, this was one of my Shelf of Shame games.
Yes, it was. Hobby World was nice enough to send us some games, and this was one of them. I reached out and I requested this one in particular because I had seen it on the hotness on BGA, and I started looking at it, and I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. It's a 2-player game where there is a serial killer, there's a detective, and you're the detective's trying to figure out who the murderer is. I'm like, wow, that sounds cool. I think it's something that's right up my daughter's alley that she would like. So I reached out and they were nice enough to send it to us. So this is, like I mentioned, published by Hobby World. The designer is Arthur Hodzikov, and art is done by Owl Agency. So the way this game plays is you have a board, and it is basically a grid of the city. And there's 16 separate blocks in this city. Okay. You have a bunch of different civilians, and you're going to select a number of civilians, and you're going to place those on the board. So each block has a space for 3 civilians. So you start the game by putting 2 civilians in each of the corner blocks and then 1 civilian in each of all of the other blocks. There are a number of buildings that get placed out on the board, and the detective is going to be interacting with these buildings throughout the game. So you've got a police station, a hospital, a fire station, and then a diner. And there'll be 2 of each of these that are seated out onto the board depending on which version of the game that you're playing. There's a detective marker, which is a little detective car that's going to go out onto the board. You have a surveillance token, and this will be used by the detective to do surveillance throughout the game. There's motive cards. So to start the game, the killer is going to select at random one of the civilians. That civilian will be a murderer. Will be the murderer. Then the killer will select somebody else who's called the person of interest. The person of interest is going to be on the side of the killer. Then there will be
social group.
Yep. Then there'll be a social group. So there's a number of social groups in the game. There'll be a social group that's sympathetic to the killer as well. And the killer will select that. And this is all done in secret before the game starts. The killer will then write this down on a piece of paper that they're using to track everything in the game. And they'll fold it under so that the detective can't see who the killer is, who the person of interest is, and who the supporters are. Okay. So then you start the game. So there's a few different game modes. There is a game mode called Logic Mode, and then there's a game mode called Intuition Mode. So Tyson and I, we ended up playing Logic Mode. This is what's recommended as you're getting started into the game. This is a cool thing I think about the game is that there's a bunch of different modes that you can play and a bunch of different scenarios. There's more that we can explore that we haven't explored yet.
And every game, even if you don't go into the different modes, right? You mentioned the motive cards. Every game, there are 6 different motive cards that are going to be selected that could be potential motives for the killer.
Right.
And what I think is really interesting is there's a huge stack. I don't know how many is in that stack, but there's like a huge stack of potential motives.
Right.
And the way that they interact and change is really interesting because those motives are setting confinements for what the killer can do. For example, there could be like geospatial kind of constraints on the killer. They can only kill within a specific 4-block radius, or they can only kill in the outer 8 blocks, or there could be other constraints like, hey, you're only going, as the killer, you can only kill victims of the same gender, or you can only kill them of the same social class or social group or whatever. So there's all these different like intertwining things, and the way that those motives lay out, as the killer, you're sitting there trying to decide, how do I kill my victims to make it look like I'm doing as many of these potential motives as possible. So the fact that this game has like an abundance of these motive cards creates a huge degree of variability in what you can play and how it does play. And I think that's really interesting.
I think that's one of the most interesting parts of the game, really. So the way the game turn works is there's the murder phase, right? So the murder is going to intimidate somebody. And the way that works is you just flip over a card and you have intimidated that person as the murderer. What that means is that the detective can't ask them questions, right? And that's one of the things that the detective can do during the game. Then the murderer goes and he murders somebody that is a legal target based on whatever their motive is. It can't be in the space that the detective is in. So they go ahead and they do that. They put it at the side of the board. And then there's this cutout of a person that goes where the murder happened, right?
Yeah, homicide scene taping off of a victim's body.
Yes, exactly. Then it goes into the detective phase. The detective's going to go straight to the murder scene, right? And he's going to clear out all the civilians that are currently there. They get moved to adjacent city blocks. That's the initial response. Then the investigator then has some things that he can do. Okay. He can question civilians. And when he questions civilians, he asks basic questions about who the murderer is. So he'll ask, age, what's the build, what's the height? And then that person will answer yes or no to that question. Okay. The trick is, if the person that's being questioned is the person of interest, they don't have to tell the truth. Or if it's in a social group who you're asking, if they're in that social group that's aligned with the murder, they don't have to answer correctly either. But everybody else has to answer correct, the yes or no, and can't lie about it. Okay. So questioning civilians, that's a big way to kind of narrow down who the murderer is. There's actions, like I said, police station actions. You can put surveillance on certain people, and then you ask that person, can you be murdered now by the murder? Right?
I think I underutilized surveillance, right? That became a very important thing because it was a way to eliminate multiple possible motives at the same time if you were clever enough to do it. And the time that I did it, because I only did it one time and I did it late in the game that I was playing a killer as, and as soon as I did it, I asked a question that I was like, I should have asked the exact opposite question that I just asked, because that gave me nothing that I wanted.
That happened multiple times.
But if I had done it the right way, like the amount of things that I could have crossed off my list were like a lot, and in comparison to a normal action of questioning a normal victim, or a normal witness. So I thought that was an interesting mechanism. But the thing about the surveillance tokens and the police stations is they're located at specific spots on the board.
Yep.
And you can only put tokens on people who are adjacent to it. So you also have to have this kind of strategy of, how do I move people into specific areas so that I can get surveillance on the people I want to get it on.
Yep, exactly. And the surveillance is only finding out the motive. You're not finding out other attributes of the killer, right? Because really what you're trying to do in this game is you're trying to figure out, all these civilians have attributes on them, right? Are they in their 40s? Are they tall? Are they, of medium build or whatever? So you're trying to narrow down who has these, attributes by asking these civilians questions, and then determine who the actual killer is and what their motive is. That's the whole goal of the game. And all these actions you can do with the police station. The diner lets you question people in adjacent areas. The hospital lets you comfort people so they're no longer intimidated. The fire station helps you take a social group token that and flip that over so that you can narrow down, okay, I asked this person from this social group, the outcasts, right? I know that they are not aligned. They're not a supporter, right? So when I ask them a question, I know it's going to be answered correctly, right? Unless they're the person of interest, right? Or the murderer themselves, right? So there's always a little bit of doubt there, but you can ask multiple people in that supporter group and be pretty confident that they're telling the truth.
Which
right?
I thought was interesting, right? Because there's always that like little nagging doubt in the back of your head of, are the questions I'm asking these people accurate or not? So I found myself having to ask multiple witnesses, the same questions to confirm their validity.
Yeah, you did that the first round that we played. I'm like, you're asking the same question over and over again. And
I did it 3 times, which I think was too much.
Yeah, that was one too many.
One too many. But at least you have to, especially if you don't have anything to work off of, you have to start establishing points at which it is. Because it's a complete deduction game. Once you have information, there is potential for perfect information that you're getting, that you can narrow it down to a logical like absolute, and that's what you're looking to do throughout the game.
Yep. So the detective takes 2 actions, then it goes to the city phase. The city phase, it's called working with the public. So wherever the detective is, if there's any intimidated civilians there, then the detective comforts them. They are no longer intimidated, and then they can be asked questions in future rounds. Okay. And then you move civilians. So the murderer will take a random token from the social group stack, and there's a stack of social groups. And then the murderer can then move those people to an adjacent city block. Then the detective does the same thing, move citizens. And that's actually a really important part of the game, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we learned this in the second game, that if you can load up 3 civilians in one city block, it becomes very advantageous for the detective because you can question everybody with one action in a city block.
So long as they're not intimidated, which started to show me who do I need to intimidate? Because if they move into that block, like who do I need to make sure is intimidated? So you cannot maximize that potential for asking 3 people 3 questions and get more information in one turn than otherwise.
Yeah, which was a cool part of the game, right? Because the civilians are moving around, they're getting intimidated. I'm trying to get them all in one spot. You're trying to split them up. And I thought that was a really interesting, cool part of the game. This goes on for 5 rounds. Potentially 6 rounds, but the games we played were 5 rounds, right? And at the end of the 5th round, then the detective is going to make a guess on who they think the murderer is, and then what the motive for the murderer is. And if they're right, the detective wins. If they're wrong, then the murderer gets away, right?
Unless you cheat in any way, shape, or form, the rules are very clear. And if you cheat, then you lose.
Yeah, which, that may bring us to one of the concerns we have about the game, right?
Yeah, I think, I'm a huge deduction fan, right?
Yeah.
There's no secret there. I love deduction games. And I think what this game does in its simplicity and the way it works is incredibly clever.
Right.
My only concern is, and you nailed it on the head when we played it, is that the ability for this game to lose its potential integrity of the game, it sits on a razor's edge sometimes.
Oh yeah, it does.
Right, there are potential here that if somebody accidentally makes a mistake in answering a question, in placing a card, or showing information that they're not supposed to be doing, it will make everything else kind of fall apart to some extent.
It ruins the game. That's all there is to it, right? It ruins the game. Once you give information that you weren't supposed to give, There's no
going
there's
back.
no going
You can't
back.
rewind
like,
that.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
No.
It's just that information is out there, and then that other person has an advantage.
And
right?
how do you compensate for that? You can't compensate
Right.
for that because you could be like, well, let me give you a hint, but then how does that work at all, right?
Is
Like,
my hint equal to your hint? I don't
Yeah.
know. Who has the advantage now?
Now,
Right?
I recognize, having played a lot of deduction games, there are a lot of deduction games where that can be the case. I think
Yep.
of Cryptid, right? Like where
Right.
if somebody puts a token in the wrong space, it can ruin everything. I feel like the potential for that is true in any deduction game. I just worry that the barrier to entry here may be a little higher in that regard, because there are things in this game that is difficult to recognize how to play it well until you've played it a couple of times.
Right.
We ended up, or even a better example of that is that both players playing need to be very well versed on what the rules are for both sides of the fence, so that you don't accidentally give information that you weren't supposed to or not. We had one instance in which Kevin was the detective. He went to a police station and put a surveillance token on somebody and then asked that person a question. What we didn't realize is that it was the person he put it on couldn't have answered the question was incapable of answering the question based off of the rules.
Was with the detective, I think is what it ended up
Yeah.
being, right? And to be fair, it is clearly stated in the rules
Yes, absolutely.
that you don't answer that question.
That was our fault.
That was our fault.
My fault for answering it when I shouldn't have answered it. Your fault for
asking the question.
asked
It was
the
a
question in the
stupid
first
play.
place, right? Like it was on us. It was absolutely our fault.
But it still happened. You
and
know?
I still gave the answer. And then
you're
I
like-
backtracked the answer and I went,
Just
oh,
kidding. Not, it wasn't the real answer.
That doesn't happen. So like it made it really difficult to put that genie back in the bottle kind of a situation.
You just can't do it. And I mean, people could argue, well, that's just play better, right?
Absolutely.
But we talked about it after, and we play a lot of games, right?
We do.
And we screwed up 2 games in a row.
Because, it wasn't just the first game that we screwed up. It was both back-to-back games. It wasn't like we waited a period of time to play the second game either.
Right.
We played them back-to-back and screwed up in different ways.
I feel like we got worse in some ways, which, that's an indictment on us. I guess.
That's our own fault.
That's our own fault. That's not the game's fault at that point. But still, it is something to really be aware of, right? You have to really be concentrating on the
and maybe that's
answers that you're giving, making sure that you're giving the correct answers, you understand the rules, because it's funny. The rules do say if you are caught cheating, then the other person immediately wins, right? And when I read those rules initially, I'm like, oh, it's somebody who's cheating on purpose. But no, it's probably those rules are there because if you cheat and you don't know you cheated, then it creates this big imbalance in the game. The game's essentially over at that point.
Each
right?
time we decided, hey, well, let's just continue.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Continue. And we realized as we continued, those rules are probably in there because it's saying just restart the game, because it's probably better to just restart the game.
Yeah.
Because you don't actually know who competitively won that game, because was it as a result of the error that was made, or was
Right.
it a result of your competency in being able to deduce the answers, right?
So with all of that said, though, I think this game is a great game. And I think it's really well designed. And I think when it is played and played accurately, it is a fun experience.
Absolutely.
And a satisfying experience. So we were talking about a potential solution, right?
Yes.
Like if this game is on BGA and you are forced to follow the rules,
You can't cheat.
you can't cheat, right? You're doing everything right. I think it'd be a great experience.
I want
right?
this to be on BGA because I want to get this game right and practice it so much that like we could play it on the table.
Right.
I want to get into this intuition mode and experience that. I worry that maybe I am dumb. Maybe I am the problem here. And so force me to do it right, and that'd be great. Force me not to say anything. And the table talk is not necessary. So on BGA, even without having like table talk, that
it was
would
a
be
lot
great.
of thinking, right?
It was.
And like when you're the detective, it's like, okay, you got to take good notes, which is cool. I love that. And you're marking off things. And I remember I did surveillance one time, and I was able to get rid of 3 or maybe even 4 of the motives. I wasn't 100% sure on 2 of them, but it ended up that I was right at the end of the game. And that was really cool, right? So, I mean, it does a lot of things really good.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to explore. Like we mentioned, there's game variations, there's scenarios. You go to the end of the rule book and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 7 different scenarios that you can play. I don't even know what those scenarios do, but I want to find out, right?
I think it is a fun game. And I think that if you like deduction style games and you're willing to, like, my recommendation is if you're going to play this game, you and whoever you're playing with both need to read the rules.
Yep.
Because we did that. We both read the rules, right?
Yep.
We need to read the rules and then maybe even watch a video of how to play it, right? Like, or how to play video kind of a thing, so that you can feel fairly confident on the rules and feel fairly confident that your first experience can be not tainted by accidentally giving away information that you shouldn't have, right? And then I think you're going to have a pretty good experience with this game. But just know that is potentially going to be there if you get this game and you mess it up. Just know that that's a possibility. It's easier. Let's just reset the game and start
over, because it's not a really long game.
Yeah,
so
it's not.
So,
I will say one other thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In terms of like a complaint of this game, and this is a nitpick. This isn't a real complaint.
Yeah.
This is. I find it interesting that the box says it's 2 to 4 players on it.
Oh, it's a 2-player game.
It's 100% a 2-player game.
Yep.
It's as much a 4-player game as it is a 400-player game, right? Like,
because everybody can be the detective,
Yeah.
right? It's like, no.
you just do teams and it makes no difference. Everybody contributes and has the information.
Yeah.
If you can play this at 4 players, you literally could play this at 400 players at the same type of rationale. So to me, it's a 2-player game.
Clearly a 2-player game. Now, I would recommend it at that.
Now, maybe there's modes in there that are more suited to having a team approach, and maybe having multiple people's intuition is going to support that. But like, as the game is
what we played,
it's definitely a 2-player game.
2-player. Yep. So that is Intent to Kill. Go check it out.
Yeah. So again, this is we're playing a lot of games together. Obviously, we mentioned that at the top of the show. The next game I want to talk about is a game that we already talked about. Eric, our friend, introduced us to a new game. And this is a game that I had it was not on my radar at all.
I hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it. And it's a game called Middle Ages. It is published by Studio H. The designer is Marc Andre, and the artist is Claire Conan. And this art is really nice. The way this game, and I'll get how the game plays, but by the end of the game, what you have is this giant tableau that is in front of you of unique tiles that have unique art on all of them, and it creates this kind of canvas experience.
Yeah, almost like a story is unfolding before you.
It really is. You look at what you've developed, and you have like, oh, look, I've got farmers over here.
Yeah,
I've got soldiers over here. I've got my palace over here. And it's created this kind of almost like middle-aged mosaic of sorts. And I think it was really well thought out how they designed this from an aesthetic standpoint.
Well, and the pieces can only go in certain spots, right?
Yep.
There's certain cutouts that they slot into, which I thought was a nice touch too.
Agreed. Yeah. So this is a tile placement game and a resource management kind of a game. So in the game, essentially what you're doing is you're developing your fiefdom to make it as efficient and economically sound as possible. So in the game, there are 8 different types of tiles. You have fields, farms, villages, forts, markets, barracks, churches, and palaces. And each of these tiles has a unique scoring system for how they will interact. During the game, you have a grid of these tiles that are placed in front of you. So I think it's a 4x4 grid in a 3-player game. It was a 4x4 grid for us, which is what we played. And so each round, what is going to happen is people are going to essentially draft what tile they want, and then place a little worker on the next tile that they're going to want for the next round.
So you're drafting the tile that your worker is currently on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
So everybody has a little horse and person meeple, and they get placed on a tile of what tile they want. It's reserving the tile. I think of like a Splendor to some extent, like you're choosing the thing that you want, and then you're going to get it later, right? So everybody is placing those meeples down, and all of these tiles are placed in this grid. Each tile has a symbol that corresponds to the type of tile it is, if it's a church or if it's a barrack or if it's, a windmill or whatever it is, right? And those are going to obviously have the different scoring mechanisms for them. But then on some of the tiles, there are other things that may be more valuable. You'll have symbols of how many farmers are on there, or you'll have symbols of how many, I think, treasure chests.
Yeah, treasure chests
is one of them. And that's going to go into the different type of scoring for different things. And the reasons you might want a tile is going to be varying based off of what is showing up on each of these tiles. Additionally, by selecting a tile, you're also selecting your turn order. So tiles are placed in this grid, and if you place your meeple on the leftmost tile on the grid, that means you're going to go first in selection in turn order next time. And then if you're selecting the far right one, you're definitely going last in turn order, which I thought was an interesting mechanism for turn order.
And can affect things quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely, because you're trying to make sure that you're taking the tiles that you want right now, but also planning ahead for the tiles that you're wanting to get in later rounds.
Right, yeah.
So each of these tiles, like I said, is going to have different scoring mechanisms. For example, the market tile is going to have the market symbol on it, and then it will score a point for every market symbol that you have in that exact row of your market tiles, or it's going to score a point for every symbol wherever they are in your tableau of the treasure chest icon.
Yep.
So if you're drafting and have a market scoring mentality, you're wanting to get as many of these treasure chests as possible.
But everybody else knows that you're trying to do that as well, right?
And so they're thinking, how do I hate draft potentially, or how do I make sure that they're not? But
it's that classic balance of, do I hate draft because it's going to hurt you, or do I draft something that's going to benefit me, right? There's decisions like that all over the place.
Which I think, so there are two different tiles in this game that I think are all about the hate draft. That's going to be your barracks, your military strength, and your windmill. So your barracks are going to be the red tile, and on them, for every red tile you have in your tableau that is greater than your opponent's, you're going to steal 2 points from your opponent, and you're going to score points for every red tile in your tableau. So like you're trying to get as many red tiles as you can, but other players don't want to be hurt, and they have defensive tiles. So the defensive tiles are the turrets, like the blue tile,
the blue
right?
tiles, yeah.
And those will protect against raids from your opponents. So if you have more red tiles than your opponents have blue tiles, you're stealing points from them. So
yeah, and that can mess with your strategy, right? Because you're like, I don't want to get stolen from, but I really want these market tiles because that's what I'm going for. So it's that balance of what do I do?
Absolutely.
Which is a cool decision. And then there's also, and I don't think you've mentioned this, there's the end of round scoring tiles that you get based on how you've built out all of your stuff. You can get bonus points. Yep. And that's something you think about as well, right?
Well, and so there's the palace tiles and the church tiles are going to also, so you have end of round bonus tiles or bonus cards. So at the end, once you get all the way down the grid of potential tiles, that's when one of these bonus cards will score at the end of each round. Some of them are positive effects, some of them are negative effects.
Like you can always plan for it because you know what's coming.
Right. And so like the church tile and the palace tiles are going to allow you to increase your engine's potential output. So like there's a coin icon, which is the synonymous with your victory points. So if you have coin icons, you'll get, if you go and place on a church tile in your tableau, you're going to be able to get more coin icons, scoring more points for each of the things you do. And you can put that in any engine that you want. So like there's this little coin token that you'll put at the bottom of it, and if you scored 2 points for every market, for example, normally, by putting an additional coin there, now every market, every time you score your market, is going to score you 3 points. So it increases your engine and whatever you're doing. And then the palace similarly does that, but it increases the symbols. So if you put the symbol there, anytime you score market again,
you're going to score something else.
You can choose to add additional points.
I love that. When we played, so this one's on BGA, which I love when I play a game on the table and then I find out it's on BGA.
Yep.
Find out it's on BGA. So we immediately got a game going, and I did that palace action, put an icon on a spot where I was going fairly frequently, and had a bunch of other.
You ran away with that,
which was awesome. I was doubling up points everywhere, and I found that palace action was just amazing. It was really fun and satisfying.
I couldn't figure out this game is deceptively simple looking, right? Like it looks like it's simple, and it's not overly complex, but it is very thinky. Exactly.
Yep.
And I went through and I could not wrap my head around how do I optimize placing those tokens to increase my output and ensure that I'm drafting the tiles that I want to do. There's a lot going on. I was very pleasantly surprised by this because, one, like I said, I hadn't heard about this game at all. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about it. Eric pulls it out and he's like, "You want to play this? Oh, by the way, at the end of it, it's on BGA if you guys want to play it." And so we were like, okay, yeah, absolutely. And we started playing it. And there was more thought going into this than I had anticipated. At first, I remember thinking this was like, what is that mind game that we played, the Vivid Memories. We played that with Dan years ago, and at first, like so the degree of thinkiness in that game
was so thinky.
Oh, it was deceptively simple looking.
Oh yeah,
and the degree of thinkiness was like really high, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that again.
we got to the end of that game, and everybody just looked around and were like,
I'm exhausted.
I don't know if I even like that. Yeah.
But like that's at first when we started playing this, I was like, oh no, is this going to be another Vivid Memories experience? Because there was a lot. But once we started going, I started understanding everything, and it started to click, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah, I'm excited it's on BGA, and I'll continue to play on BGA. And I'd play it on the table as well because, like you said, it is a beautiful production. And when you're done, you've got this big, area in front of you that tells a story. I think it's cool.
That's one thing I feel like I didn't get the same satisfying experience on BGA.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like it's just not that same tactile kind of mosaic feel that I got when it was on the table, and I loved it on the table, and I'm so glad it's on BGA because absolutely I get to explore this game more. So this is the game is Middle Ages.
Yep. So the next game I'm going to talk about, another Vladimir Suchy game. We've been talking about him for years. We just talked about Recifa. Fantastic game. This one is called Aldebaran Duel. So the duel games are all the rage nowadays. It seems like every version of a game comes out with a duel version. Tyler talked about Res Arcana Duo in the last episode. This one, Aldebaran Duel, I have actually only played this single player, which I seem to be doing more and more lately, and I'm actually enjoying it. This game is a fantastic single player game. I want to play it with 2 players as well. But the way that this game works is you have a main game board. And on this game board, there are a bunch of, they're called scales. They're called production scales, scales of influence, point production scales. They're basically just, you can move up on these tracks throughout the game. All right. There are a bunch of different cards, and they're split up into 3 different epochs. The first, second, and third epoch. You got some science cards, a bunch of tokens. And then there's this board of influence. The way that the game works is you have all of the cards in one epoch, and you put them in a grid. So a 2x3 grid. So 2 cards on the top, 2 cards in the middle, 2 cards on the bottom. Okay. On your turn, you have a choice. You can choose a card from the offer, you can play a card from your hand, or you can pass. If you choose a card, you can buy one from the offer. The top 2 cards are worth 3, the middle 2 cards are worth 2, and the bottom 2 cards are worth 1. So you have 3 points that you can spend on your turn. All right. You can take 1 card from the top, you can take a card from the middle and the bottom, you can take both of the bottom cards if you would like. So that's the first thing you do is you can purchase a card. The second thing is you can play a card. So a card that you've previously purchased, you can play that card from your hand. Now each card is going to have a cost to play that card. And what's cool is these are multi-use cards. I absolutely love multi-use cards. So on the bottom, there's resources that you can spend that card for that resource in order to build another card. Okay. Also, you are playing cards, you're moving up these production tracks. If you have the production built up to play that card, you can use that production to play the card. Also in combination with other cards to get it out. Okay. So, the one rule is you have to pay at least 1 resource. You can't use 100% production and get a card out for free. You're always having to pay at least 1 resource to get that card out. Okay. Or you can pass. If you're done, you can pass for the round. The types of cards that you can play. So production cards, like I said, they just increase your production along those tracks. There's space shuttle cards. They also move along tracks like the diplomacy track and the military track. There's planet cards, and these planet cards are cool because they're split into different like sectors, right? So there's 4 different areas of these cards, and you play colonization cards in order to colonize that planet. So colonization cards have little like quarter pieces of planets in the corner of the card. You play that card, you overlay it onto the planet card. If there's a white border, that means you have to either put that color in there or some of them are neutral colors. You can put anything, but you're trying to completely colonize that planet. All right. And once you do, you get this really cool reward. And not only that, you can have a colonization ship come to that planet, 1 colonization ship per completed planet. And those give you really cool rewards. So you're kind of building up these planets to get colonization ships out.
It looks a little bit like Pulsar to me, the dice technologies where you're putting together like tiles.
The two sides of the transmitters.
Yeah, transmitters. That's the one I was.
Yeah. So you're doing all these things. You're getting space object tokens, which these are multipliers for the end of the game based on which planets that you're getting out and colonizing. And they're kind of cool. So you're going to play until everybody passes. And then you get to the end of the epoch. Then you go to the board of influence, and you have a token in the middle of the board of influence. And depending on how well you've done with diplomacy, how well you've done with military, how well you've done with trade, you're going to move this token along this board of influence. And that's going to give you bonus points, or it's going to give your opponent bonus points. So it's kind of like this tug of war of this token on this influence board, which I thought was a really kind of interesting part of the game as well. At the end of the round, you have the opportunity to purchase science cards. These are little tokens that will give you bonuses throughout the game, so you can find cool synergies with whatever your strategy is going to be. You do this over 3 epochs, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to win. What you're doing in a single player game, you're trying to get a high score. I've played this 4 times. Just solo. It says a good score is 100, I believe, in the game. Reaching 100 points is it actually says great result. I got like 60 something, 3 games in a row, and I'm like, I suck at this game. And then the 4th game I played, I got 99. And I'm like, oh, it felt so good, and it felt so satisfying.
Does it have a category for 60 whatever?
No, it doesn't,
okay.
Luckily, because that probably would have deterred me from playing again. It's like, you suck.
Terrible.
Yeah, you suck and should not play this game again. Just a little bit about the solo mode. I think it's done really, really well. So there's this little, this thing you put along the side of the card offer. Okay. And you flip over one of 8 tiles, and these tiles are going to have a little arrow that points to a part of this bigger tile next to the card offer. And it will just tell you what you're going to do. It'll tell you, okay, I'm going to remove certain cards from the card offer, or the bot is going to move along a production track just randomly. It is so streamlined and so easy to do. It just makes single player it was a lot of fun to play, right? It was just very low overhead, and I love those types of single player games.
That's my favorite, absolutely. Yes. If solo is just a small maintenance of what you're doing, and you can focus on what you're doing instead of playing like two-handed, like that's what I want in a solo experience.
Yeah, and what I don't, solo games that there's a lot of upkeep, I forget to do things, right? Because I'm thinking about my turn and what I'm supposed to do. And then I'm like, okay, well, did I do that or did I not do that? And then you feel like you're missing something in the game, and it kind of ruins it a little bit. It's like, if it's just, I'm flipping over one thing and doing that one thing, and then I'm back to my turn. It's like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to sit there and waste my brain power on how to play the other player that I like, my opponent. I want to focus on my strategy and what I'm doing, and just react to what they're doing, more or less.
Exactly. So I thought it was great. I mean, if you like single player games, this is one to check out. I want to play it multiplayer. I think it's going to play great that way as well. So,
and it's a dual game, so it's a 2-player only.
Absolutely,
game,
only 2-player.
I wish we had gotten a play of this on our 2-player night.
I know, but we were deep into it. Intent to kill.
We were.
Yeah. But we'll have to get it played.
No, this looks good. This looks, and it's Vladimir Suhi, so I have to try it at this point.
Yep.
I have to play all of his.
Yeah, I think there's very few that I haven't played at this point. Yeah, you got to play every game that he comes out with. So that one is Aldebaran Duel, published by Rio Grande Games, and then, like we mentioned, it's Vladimir Suhi.
Well, it sounds like you were trying to explore planets and be like really nice in Aldebaran Duel, like expand and explore and all that type of stuff. My game is not about being nice. It's not about expanding or exploring or doing anything good. It's about the exact opposite. This is a game of mad science. If you've seen Despicable Me, this is Despicable Me, the board game. It's called Nefarious. Nefarious is published by the Op Games, and it is designed by Donald X. Vaccarino.
Who's that?
Who is that? Right? We just talked about Moon Colony Bloodbath recently.
And there's a little game called Dominion,
right? Like he's a prolific designer, and we really like his stuff. I've had this game for years. I've owned a copy. I actually got a free copy years ago to demo and play this game, but I hadn't played it in probably 5 or 6 years, and I thought my son loves Despicable Me, and he loves the mad science vibe, and so let me go and see if I can teach him this game if it's simple enough to do. So essentially, what this game is you're trying to be a mad scientist inventing a bunch of different creations, devices, shrink rays, and monsters and like nuclear holocaust. No, it's not quite that bad. It is a kid-friendly game, but you're trying to kind of take over the world, essentially.
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at X-ray specs at the nude beach here.
Oh, and I don't even have...
Have you seen that card?
I don't have that card. That's a different art style entirely than what I've got.
Oh, it is. I wonder... There's probably different versions
Maybe
of
that's
it.
an older version.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well... This is basically I feel like the art in this plus the gameplay was designed around the idea of Despicable Me. Is pretty much how I feel.
Yeah, it looks like that for sure.
It is a worker placement game. I think this was the precursor to Moon Colony Bloodbath.
So we used some design cues from this one.
Absolutely. So the way that this game works is that everybody is going to have a series of like meeples. And then they're trying to get money. And these meeples are used to be placed on a board to kind of maximize the actions you can do. But every game is going to start with a twist card.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
So every twist is going to be unique, and it's going to alter the rules slightly of how it plays when that is interacting. Now, it's not a communal like deck building deck. This is everybody has their own action cards. These action cards are identical to one another, but they're very much like the work cards in Moon Colony Bloodbath to me. But what you're trying to do in the game is players are acting kind of in simultaneous play. Everybody is going to select an action card and place it face down in front of them. Once everybody is ready, they reveal that action card and what it is they're going to do. Each of these action cards corresponds with 4 spaces on the board of the different actions you can do. There's the 4 spaces are espionage, invent, research, and work. And once everybody has selected their action, then you're going to simultaneously perform those actions. Espionage is an activity that you do that you can place a worker on the board. And when you do that, workers on the board are going to collect money because the second step of the phase is to collect money for however many workers you have. The whole objective of the game is to have, I think it's $20 by the end of the game, or it's a certain amount of money that you have, and then whoever achieves that, the game ends on the turn that they collected that amount of money. And so
it's kind of the opposite of
it is. You're not trying to destruct everything.
Right. The game ends when everybody's dead in one colony.
Correct.
The game ends when somebody gets a certain amount of points.
Rich, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
Beyond comprehension rich.
Yeah. Okay.
$20 is not it. It's obviously, it's abstract. That's the word.
Yeah.
The $20 is an abstract amount of $20.
Yes,
but,
right.
So you're trying to do these things. Espionage puts workers on the board. Invent allows you to invent a card from your hand. So you're also collecting these invention cards. The invention cards have a number of different... they're like the building cards in Moon Colony Bloodbath. Right. And then you're trying to build them out by spending a certain amount of money, and then they have actions on them when you play them, or actions when certain things happen. So again, it's sounding very familiar, I think. Then you do research as a third potential action. The research action is just collecting new cards and getting new invention cards into your hands, and it collects $2 on your turn. Or you can work to get $4 just outright.
It's like mining.
It is mining
or
and
researching to get cards.
Exactly.
Or is it
developing?
Yeah, you get boxes somehow.
But it is, to me, a very condensed version of Moon Colony Bloodbath to some extent.
Okay. All right.
And so you're going through building these different inventions and they're going to chain off of each other to do different things. Some of them have effects that are going to impact only you. Some of them may impact other players. And you're just trying to react and build your tableau of inventions as fast as you can. I think that I really like that Nefarious exists because I think it allowed Moon Colony Bloodbath to exist.
Yeah.
But
you like that it's a stepping stone to a better game?
Moon Colony Bloodbath is the game I would play 10 times out of 10 over this one. Nefarious is a fun game. I think to expose my kids to like some worker placement elements, action selections, that type of thing. But it is a stepping stone game as well. It's not one that I would bring to like a big game night. Right. It's not one that I would personally want to play over and over and over again.
Right.
But I do. It is fun to go back and see this game and see how it could have influenced the design pedigree of Donald X. Vaccarino into designing a game that I absolutely love.
Right.
Moon Colony Bloodbath.
Yeah, which is one of the best games. It could be the best game of the year for us, right? And it's cool to see. Yeah, I agree with that. It's cool to see where that came from, even though it may not be the best game. But it's like, oh yeah, there's similarities here. Right?
And I'm sure you could make comparison to some of the Dominion elements and the expansions of Dominion and how some of those cards interact here too. So it's his style of card game, right? It is primarily a card game, and you're trying to make synergies based off of how your cards work to get enough points to win.
Nice. I like it.
So that's Nefarious.
So I love card games, right? Talked about Aldebaran Duel. That's a card game. Another one that we recently played is called Fives. This is in what's called the Magenta line of games from CMYK. So they were nice enough to send us the 4 games that they have released in this line, and one of them is Fives. This one is designed by Taiki Shinzawa. Like I mentioned, it's published by CMYK. And according to Board Game Geek, it's been around since 2022. So I thought initially that this was a brand new game, but I think they brought this over and they published it here in the States.
And they put it in this line.
And they put it in this
more
line.
of a relatively new line.
Yep. Well, and it's funny. So I opened this box from CMYK. I knew that the games were bright. And they are really bright. Like, think Pepto-Bismol pink.
Like, I need to wear sunglasses to look at the boxes.
Yeah, right. I think it's cool. I think, the packaging is amazing. All the games come in this sleeve, and then you open a box inside of that. The rules are kind of tucked in this other little sleeve, which is kind of cool. But really, you open the game, and it is everything. I just opened up Fives, and everything is magenta.
There's a lot of pink.
There's a lot of
color,
pink going on. It's interesting too. There's a bag that tokens come in. You don't see many games that have an actual paper bag that stuff comes in.
Yeah, it looks like a carnival, or like a peanuts or a popcorn bag.
It does look like peanuts. Very nice. But it has a certain charm though, right? Does. Which I think is kind of cool, and it sets it apart from other games. Okay, so Fives, what is this? So it's a trick-taking game. I love trick-taking games, right? And the thing about a trick-taking game is each new trick-taking game that comes out has to have a twist, right? It has to have something that separates it. A lot of games say, oh, this game is kind of like Hearts, but it does this that's different, right? That's what this one does too. So in this game, based on the player count, you'll have a certain number of cards. And those cards are numbered, I think, 1 to 13, if I remember right. The whole deck gets dealt out to all the players playing. And then you start playing. So just like any other trick-taking game, you're going to lead. So there'll be a lead player and they'll play a suit, which is the lead suit. Everybody has to follow suit if they have that card in their hand. So let's say silver's a bad example because that is Trump. So let's do teal. So there's teal. Somebody plays a 2 teal. Everybody else has to play a 2 teal unless they don't have it. If they don't have it, they can play anything and they break the suit at that point. If you can't play the lead suit and you have a silver card, you can play that, and that is the Trump suit. So you will win that trick if you play Trump. If nobody plays that, then whoever played the highest of the lead suit is going to win that trick.
Very standard trick-taking.
There you go. That's trick-taking. That's just how it works. The twist, and there's 2 twists in this game, is that when you win a trick, the card that you won that trick with goes in front of you on top of the trick, okay? And you score point. You don't score points, but you have points based on what that card is. So I play an 11. Now I have 11 points. I'm trying to get as close to 25 as possible by the end of that round.
Price is Right rules. Without going over.
Yeah, exactly. If you go over, you bust, right? And you're going to lose points at the end of the round. If you end up getting to 25 exactly, you're going to get a bonus point. You will potentially get the maximum number of points that you can get at the end of that round, which is 3. If you get to 25, you get a bonus point, which is 4. If you don't tie with somebody else. If you tie with somebody else, then you're going to get less points, right? If you don't tie in your second, you get 2. If you don't tie and you get third, you get 1 point. If you bust, you give the person that won 1 of your points. So it's kind of a kick in the gut if you if you bust, right? Okay, so that's the first twist. The second twist is on the back of every single card in the game, there's a magenta 5. Okay. That card can be played. You can play a card face down into the trick as a magenta 5. If somebody leads with a magenta, you can play any card in your hand down as magenta 5. Only 1 can be played per trick, but it makes for some interesting decisions and some interesting play, right? Because you can bury cards that you can't get rid of otherwise. If you're trying not to win tricks anymore because you're at 25 and you have a 13, you're like, this is a horrible card for me to have. I'm going to play it face down as a magenta 5. I'm going to get rid of it. That's then hidden information for everybody else. They don't know that card is then out of the game.
Which
right?
is so clever, I think.
It was really cool.
You can bury cards. Like, you don't want the 13, right, anymore of a suit.
Yep.
You can bury that. You can, and nobody knows that 13 is gone for the rest of the game or that round, right? And I think that's so clever. But the other interesting component of that, I think, is that because you flip it over, it acts as magenta, which means that the magenta suit is going to drain faster than almost any other suit, potentially.
Yes, it is.
And so
you can get people in bad spots.
Exactly. If you're at the end of a round and you're debating, and we had this happen with me. I had a trump, or I had a high value card that I could either make it be like a high value teal card, or it was the 5 on the back, the magenta 5. Right. And I sat there because I was going to win if I made the right choice, but I had to lead suit and I had to decide, do I make this a magenta 5 or do I make this the teal, I think it was a 8 or something like that, right. Which is not the highest card, but it's pretty high. It's pretty high.
Yeah.
And so I was like, which one do I do? And I elected to flip it over as a 5 magenta. And Greg was playing with us in this one, and he was sweating bullets. And I knew there was a way. I was like,
can I make him bust?
Come on, he could bust. How do I make him bust? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go with the magenta 5 because I hope somebody still has a magenta. But it allowed it. He had the ability to actually turn it. He had the Trump suit, and I forced him not to have to play the Trump suit, and I ended up losing that hand as a result of that. And I was like, if only I had flipped it over to the other side, I would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah, it makes for some fun, interesting decisions. I think it's really well done. And when you get your first initial hand of cards, you can look at your cards and say, okay, if I win this trick, and this trick, I get to 25. And you can try to work out winning those tricks, right? People are going to try to mess you up, and that's just the way it is. But you can see a plan forward, and you try to execute that plan, which is kind of interesting and cool.
What I didn't realize at first when we were playing is you can make those plans, right? You're sitting there looking at the cards you have available at the start of the round, and you're thinking, okay, what plan can I make? I ended up feeling a lot like playing Parade to some extent of how do I avoid taking anything for a while, right? Like, let me just avoid taking stuff. And so that was usually my plan, and it was working pretty well for me most of the time. But then you get to a certain point where you have to take something, and I don't know. I thought that it was interesting to be able to choose which suits to play and how to do them, unfold that plan, and then follow through and watch that plan unfold. But what I didn't really realize at first was if I don't bust, and you explained this, I just didn't pay attention to it, but if I don't bust, I could score
you still get points.
Second or third,
and
I don't give any points to anybody.
Right.
So maybe it's okay to not get close to 25. I was just so focused on that 25 value that I was like, I'm going to get 25. That's my goal.
You get to 24 and then
it makes you bust, and I now have to give up points. And it was interesting.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is cool is even if you do bust, you're not out of the round. You're going to lose points, right? But you're still playing, and you can try and sabotage.
Bust everybody else.
You can try to, misery loves company, right?
Come and get it.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and screw everybody else over so they don't get points either, which I think is a fun way to stay engaged even though you're out of the round.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah, so this is a good one. I love Trick Takers. I think this has some unique things that it does.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be playing this one.
If you like Trick Takers, I think this one's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. Like, if you collect Trick Takers, because I know a lot of people like to get the new Trick Taker, right?
Yeah.
This is one that absolutely go pick this one up. This is a no-brainer to get. I like it, and again, the box at first, I was like, what are we getting ourselves into?
Just wear your sunglasses when you play.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm super glad that you introduced this one to us.
Yeah. So that's Fives from CMYK.
So a less pop out at your face looking game.
Pop out at your face.
One that the art on this one has received a fair amount of consternation as well. The game I'm talking about next is Concordia Venus.
Oh, yeah. It's not necessarily a looker.
No,
Yeah.
it definitely is not. This is one of the games that a lot of people talk about. Concordia Venus is a better box cover than Concordia base game, but like
It is.
the look of Concordia is not known to receive a lot of high praise.
It's like a Hansa Teutonic.
Exactly. You've got this awkward looking female on the front cover that I don't know what she's looking at, but hey.
She's trading with this old bearded dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all good.
It's as bland as Rasafa, as like we talked about last episode, right?
Why do publishers do this? I don't understand. Like, make your stuff interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Or at least, I mean, if you're gonna make it bland, don't make it commentably bland. Like
This is the topic of conversation.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about your box cover. Right?
every time this game is talked about, it's talked about how weird this box looks. And I mean, hey, but maybe that's a selling point. All publicity is good publicity, right?
Hey, we're talking about it now, right? So
That's exactly
there
right.
you go. There you go.
But I think this game on its own is worth talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely. Similar to Recifer, like we talked about.
Yes.
Fantastic game.
For sure.
Yes.
So this is a game designed by Mac Gertz. It's published by PD Verlag, and it is a game of action selection. Essentially, in this game, everybody gets 8 cards. I believe it's 8 different cards at the start of the game, and they're all the same cards that have the same different actions on them. And there is a map. You're trying to establish trade goods and put goods in your warehouse, and it's a very like generic theme again. That like common place, you see this theme all over, but you're trading and trying to do resource management and do all of this different thing. But we've talked about this game before. I think the last time I played this was at a Cabin Con 2 or 3 years ago, and that's when we last talked about it. So I won't go deep in how this game plays, but what I wanted to talk about was I wanted to come back to this game because we have had a hard time getting this game to the table historically.
Yeah, not everybody in our group is a huge fan of it, right?
No.
Which is fine.
But like as we were playing this, it was me, Kevin, and Ben. We ended up playing a 3-player game of this. The more that we did stuff in this game, the more I was just floored.
Yeah,
but like
we got to get this played.
why are we not playing this game more?
It's amazing.
Like, when you play action cards, you get to do specific things. You get to upgrade your action cards to be able to get a different type of thing with them. I love the scoring mechanism on this game where it is based off of the action cards you have, and like it's going, the more of a certain type you have, it's going to compound and multiply the value of the points.
It drives your strategy, right? You're trying to get houses in certain areas, in certain regions. Like the Venus cards that get added are really cool because you're trying to get 2 houses in each region. And that's how you're going to score and double up.
It's an area control element for that portion, right? And you're trying to control that area, and you're trying to also get resources of specific types so that you can build different routes for where things are connected and making sure you're getting it. I also really like about this game the resource collection aspect of it, right?
Yes, really cool.
You have to flip over on the board. There's a series of tiles that are placed randomly for each region, and you can collect a resource that corresponds to the region on the map that you're controlling, where you have built something, right? And so you're flipping these tiles over, and you cannot get that same resource from that same region until that tile flips back over a second time, which I think is incredibly clever.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where somebody has to take that action because it's just too lucrative, right? Like you're going to get a lot of coins for it, and then it flips it over, all that stuff over for somebody else. I think that's genius.
Yeah, like again, we've talked about this one before, but I just wanted to come back and visit this game a little bit because, like you said, there have been people in our group that don't love this game, and it confused me when we played this again. I thought, hey, no, you know what? Maybe I don't like this game as much. Maybe it's not great, and I had only played it one other time. But then playing this again, this is a classic game for a good reason, right? And I think that because Concordia itself came about, the original game, in 2013. Now, I mean, that's not super long ago, but in terms of board games, it's
12 years ago.
Yeah,
that's forever.
It's been out for a fair amount of time. That's classic enough for me.
How many other games have come out in that time? A ton.
Yeah.
Right.
But like it's good, and it holds up to today.
Absolutely.
Like, I will play this game happily anytime somebody wants to play this game.
Well, I love all the different maps that you can get for this game.
Yes.
And how it scales to up to 6 players. Now, I want to play the team game. And there's Tyler has been very
mentioned this before.
Tyler's been very vocal about not liking team games, right? So, but I want to try this one and see how it works up to 6, which I think it'd be cool. I bet it's great, right? And that's one of the things that Venus introduces. But the maps come in different sizes. It scales like down. It's a tighter map if it's only 3 players, and then if you're playing more, then you can play more wide open. Or if you want to be really have a cutthroat game, you play one of the smaller maps with a higher player count, and then everybody's getting in each other's way, which is cool. Yeah,
I would love. Yeah, I would absolutely play. Like I said, I would happily play this anytime somebody wanted to play this. If we can get 6 players to play it, I would ecstatically play this one at 6 player and have that experience.
And try the team
I
game.
will say that we played this more recently, and it was just after I had sold my copy of Concordia, because I have never played my copy of Concordia.
Yeah, and you have the base.
And I have the base
Venus,
one,
right? Which is still great.
Venus.
Yeah,
and I still think selling my copy was the right choice, because if we're gonna play it, we're gonna play Venus.
Yeah, sure.
And because I don't think I would want to necessarily play the base game if Venus is an option. But I still think it was probably the right decision. But it also made me think.
But I see in your eyes how you're kind of.
Is there a little bit of a seller's remorse here?
I think there might be a little bit.
There might be. But
because I think, it's not a hard game. It's very straightforward. You're just playing a card and doing the action, right?
Yep.
So I don't think, your kids wouldn't be too far away from being able to play this, right?
Yeah.
It's a few years, but
I think we just had a similar conversation about selling games in the Discord briefly recently, where we were talking about how I feel this hesitancy to sell certain games because I have that hope, right? Hope that, well, I've never played this game. It's been on my shelf for 3 years, 4 years. But I look at it and I think one day that's going to get played. And the longer it's stayed on my shelf, the more I've been like, I don't think it's actually going to come off my shelf.
Yeah.
And that's been my problem. And I also have that hope of, maybe my kids will like this game when they're old enough to play this game.
Yeah.
But I've come to the conclusion that especially with a game like Concordia, which I think is a classic, it's not going out of print anytime soon.
No, you'll be able to get it.
Able to find a copy. I'm okay with getting rid of a game like that I can later come back to and say, okay, this is a game I want to play with my kids. They're old enough now. I'll go buy a copy.
Yeah. You know what I've been enjoying lately is pulling old games off the shelf and playing those. Right.
Well, absolutely.
So not too long ago, I got Colosseum off the shelf and played. And it was awesome, right?
I still haven't played that.
You still haven't played that one?
No.
Well, and we've talked about it. There's a new edition coming out, right? And there's a different edition that they're coming out with. But it was fun. It was kind of nostalgic for me because I played that game a lot, years and years ago when it first came out. But I need to sell a lot of games. That's just, I'm running out of room, but I have that thought over and over again. It's like, I'm going to play that someday.
I swear I will.
I'm going to do it. Right. And then sometimes I do take those older games and play them. And it's usually a fun experience. Sometimes I'm like, well, that game didn't hold up well. Right.
There are a few times, but most of the times the games that I'm pulling off my shelf based off of nostalgia are games that I enjoyed for good reason.
Yeah.
So they're likely going to be good now. There's a couple of times where that's that just doesn't hold up. But I feel like that's less frequent for me than when I pull off a game that from the shelf that's been there for a long time and I like it. Yeah. But yeah. So that was what I was playing was Concordia Venus.
Awesome. Great game. Very cool. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
Man.
This has been a lot of games.
And
we've played most of the games we've talked about together.
Hey, let's keep it up.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I think that's been fun.
No, it's been awesome.
I'm looking at these games that we've talked about. The one that I didn't play with you, Aldebaran Duel. I'm interested in playing that. I'm happy to play that. I'm excited about how many games we've been getting played lately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we've been getting some, fun games that we wouldn't normally have played, right?
Absolutely.
Like stuff in this maybe CMYK Magenta line. I don't know if I would have played that, but since they were nice enough to send it to us, I'm super happy that they did, and we got to experience that, right? So yeah, a lot of good games. It amazes me how many games come out every year and how many games we don't play, but I'm always excited about the games we do play. So.
I totally agree with that. I love being exposed to new things. I'm sad that Tyler's been so busy and hasn't been able to play with us lately, but it has allowed us to play a couple of 2-player games that we don't typically get the opportunity to do, which I've been pleased with, but I'm hoping that Tyler gets back to the table with us more regularly soon, and that we start playing more games.
Absolutely. All right.
That'll do it.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more Longest Turn in your life, please check us out on Instagram. Also, be sure to check us out on Board Game Geek, where you can join our guild, Guild 3947, and check out our blog, where we post all our show notes and occasionally post more detailed reviews. If that's not enough for you, we have a Discord server. If you want to play a game with us on Board Game Arena, join our Board Game Arena group, The Longest Turn. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Tot ziens.
Goodbye.
See you later.